Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I was relieved when I read the program and I saw that Wendell was going to introduce me. And I thought, well, if Wendell introduces me, then all those Oklahoma Republicans will think I can't be all bad. And Donna, George Nigh, and all the rest of the Nigh clan, to his former staff and colleagues, and I'd like to say a special word of appreciation to Governor Stitt and all your predecessors who are here, without regard to party. And to my friends at the Oklahoma City Memorial, thank you, Mike Turpin and Kerry Watkins and all the others. They keep me coming here, so I will watch your progress. I came here today for a lot of reasons. George and I were elected governor in the same year. And he knew that I was too young to know what I was doing. So he offered to help me make fewer mistakes. We worked together on the Arkansas River Navigation Project. If you ever have been up and down the river, particularly on a barge, you know that that was an important deal. We worked together on interstate highway improvements. I'm grateful that he supported me when I decided not to run for president in 1988, and then in 1992 when I decided to run. I'm grateful that he went around doing what he could on my behalf. And he inspired confidence, you know, and people really liked him. So he'd go around everywhere saying he was for me, and it's kind of like Wendell's introduction. They thought, well, he couldn't be all bad. I must say, politics is a wonderful way to live your life, but it's also a tough way. And it's not like athletics. That is, you have to wait a long time. Maybe you wait for your whole life if you lose before you can play the game again. And when I met George Nigh the first time, before I got to know you guys, I thought, I wonder if my wallet is still in my pocket. I said, yeah, this guy's too good to be true. Nobody is this nice. Nobody can wade through all these different political currents. We were, believe it or not, it wasn't all sweetness and light in the 1980s or in the 1990s. It's just not ever. And I said, and George had some tough times. He was, like me, fortunate in his first term. And in his second term, the economy turned and he had more difficult decisions to make. But he never seemed to change. And he realized something that I think really united us, which is that if people give you a job, it will change shape from day to day, week to week, year to year, as the challenges change, as the opportunities change. But it's a gift, a priceless gift. And you ought to enjoy it and do the best you can. And at a time when so much of politics seems like a performance art today, when people at the extremes of the political spectrum would rather be politically correct than effective sometimes. I knew a guy who thought he was supposed to improve education at every level and cared what teachers did in classrooms and whether it worked and people learned things. A guy who loved Oklahoma and thought more people ought to come from other places to see it and realized it'd be good for the economy. A guy who supported the oil economy but knew it had to be diversified because it was subject to ups and downs even back then. And a guy who appointed more women, minorities to jobs in state government, including 2 women on the Supreme Court, than anybody ever had. Not because, not, and this is really important today, because I listen to all these debates over DEI and all that kind of stuff. If you are debating about whether we should be governed by quotas, I'm against that. But if you believe that everybody deserves a chance at the brass ring, that's the American way. So I watched them do some of these things before they were particularly popular. But thank goodness they weren't particularly unpopular either. That is, if you get far enough ahead of the pack, they hadn't organized for you or against you. And George was just out there wandering around saying, I've got a job, and I'm going to do it best I can. And I'm going to wake up every day in a good humor because it's a gift. I always tell young people when they ask me, what should I do? Or does it matter where I go to college and everything? I said, look, the most important thing for you to know is this. For most of human history, our forebears had utterly no choice over what they did with their waking hours. And we do. That's the most important thing to know. George Nigh had a lot of choices. They made him happy, and I am convinced, or one of the reasons that he lasted 98 years and had all his marbles all the way to the end. Because he made good choices. And most of the rest of us will have to do with a lot less time. Arguably, that means it's even more important for us to make good choices. When I came back 4 months ago, I know that our friends who were running the Memorial Weekend were disappointed that we had to move inside. But it had one great effect for me, which is when I turned around to see who was on the stage, the first thing I saw was that big shock of white hair. And the first thing I did when I completed my remarks was to walk around the back and hug George Nigh. I agree with the speaker before me who said we needed to spend more time looking out the windshield and through the rearview mirror. But I also think that we should cherish the memories that make us feel like our better selves. Every day, we all wake up. Inside our heart, there's like a scale. Some days the scales are weighted toward hope. Some days toward fear. Some days toward trust. Some days toward anger. And I try to think about that every day. Let me see if I can't set my scales as good as possible before I open my mouth and say something I might regret. George Nigh may not have been a perfect person. He certainly worked his heart out, and his job was often harder than you could tell it was by looking at him, because he made a decision to be a happy, uplifting, positive, loving person. Part of it was in his nature, but I don't care how good-natured you are. You stay in politics long enough, you're going to have enough broken bones and scratches and Band-Aids. You have to decide what kind of person you're going to be. I thought it was interesting. He took so long to get married, but it only took him a few months once he made up his mind who he wanted to marry. And I thank you for taking him in. And, I mean, he needed a place to live and an automobile, and I thank you for giving it to him. And I thank you for being a model. You have no idea how many people in politics looked at both of you together and said, that's what we're working for. That's what we want. And when I walked out the door today, Hillary said, don't you dare forget to talk about Donna, because he would have never been who he was without her. and so I thank you. Georgiana, in all the years when you were growing up, I did not have one conversation with him ever without his first giving me an update on you. He was way more interested in that, whatever I call him about. So we have to be grateful for this life. And this is a perfect thing. If you can last with your mental capacities intact, if you can keep giving until the end, if you're happy even on the dark days, then it infects all the rest of us in ways that we don't even know. I was talking to a bunch of people much younger than George was the other day, and they were in my party, so they were worried about what was going on. And they said, you know, are we going to lose our democracy? I said, not unless we lose our guts. There's nothing permanent in human affairs. There are no permanent victories. There are no permanent defeats. When you're in the middle of them, both seem permanent. When you're riding the wave or cracking your head against the brick wall, they both seem permanent. And they're not. And the reason I love George Nigh is that he let me know that he had decided to be my friend. And that he was older than me and he knew a few things I didn't. And one was what I just told you. You have to decide what to do with every new day. You have to decide that you're going to make it better. You have to decide that you're not going to give up on other people. What a gift his life was. That's what I hope you'll remember. And I hope you'll ask yourself today, how did he keep score? Because whether you are even aware of it or not, we're all keeping score all the time. You know, I don't know how many times I'd walk past this open window and see myself reflected, and I'd think, God, if I had LeBron James's body, I would have been at a different line of work. We're all keeping score. And George kept score a little bit like this. Are people going to be better off when I quit than when I started? Are children going to have a brighter future? And are we going to be coming together and recognizing that what we have in common is more important than our interesting differences? Or are we just going to keep trying to gut each other? And I think we all know how I answer the questions. We should be paying tribute to his life for far more than 98 years. And the specifics, as important as they were, aren't as important as the fact that he came at other people with an outstretched hand, not a clenched fist. That he honestly believed that public life could be decent and honorable, and that people could be helped not so much with a hand out as with a hand up. I will always think of George with his hand up. And I will never forget the last hug I got from him. It was the gift of a lifetime. Bless you all.